Local broadcast of Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the award-winning Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, Arkansas's largest major newspaper, bringing you local, national, and international news since 1819. By the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining us this time for a special edition of Arkansas Week. As you know, every other year we like to spend a half hour with our U.S. representatives, and the gentleman who sits for the 2nd District, Representative French Hill, joins us. Thank you, sir, very much for your time.
Thanks for the invitation, Steve.
We are 7 months into a new administration. Your party owns the Congress, the White House, and thus far there's not a whole lot to show for it. Are you discouraged?
I'm not discouraged. I think it does demonstrate the American people how difficult it is in our constitutional republic in getting things passed. But from a productivity point of view, we've gotten some major things done this year in the VA area. Something we tried with President Obama was to pass legislation that would make the VA more accountable, our Veterans Affairs Department. And we've passed the VA Accountability Act that allows the Secretary to fire people that are not doing an effective job. And one of the big complaints I've heard as being a congressman here from a constituent point of view is how slow the appeals process is. It takes on average 4 years to get an appeal through the VA for a disability claim. And recently President Trump signed on a trip to Las Vegas some appeals reform legislation. So I think that was big. Those are bills that have been tried to be passed for the last 4 or 5 years. They got passed. President Trump signed them into law. Thought that was good. Getting the appropriations process partially done this year. We've done about 2/3 of spending. Has been good. We passed many of the president's priorities in the budget, particularly in the defense spending arena. And then we've gotten a good start on tax reform in terms of the work at the committee level. We got a repeal of the Dodd-Frank Act through the House, which redesigns our federal regulatory system for both capital markets and banking, that I think will give more credit to consumers, more access to services, be better for our community banks. And then we've done some good things in the regulatory environment, where I guess a majority of the bills signed into law this year by President Trump have been things that right-sized the regulatory system that many who work on economic policy issues felt had gone too far during the Obama years.
The biggie of though was the Affordable Care Act, and along with the other members of the delegation, you voted to repeal.
Right.
You sent to the Senate a bill that the majority leader said this thing's going nowhere, and
right.
in fact it went nowhere. So
right.
Where does that leave you now? Do you regret that vote at all?
No, I think the status quo on the Affordable Care Act, it needs repeal and replacement. We've got to do a better job for the American families on health care. The ACA, the Affordable Care Act, has driven up premiums and deductibles for families to the point where they're not affordable for many of our families. For 90% of Americans that are on a group health plan, they've seen skyrocketing costs for small business and big business go up. And then it has created really a dislocation for people in the individual market, where we now have 1/3 of counties don't even have a choice in the exchange policies. So in my view—
A third now of that?
Yeah, 1/3 of counties.
Go ahead.
So in my view, status quo was not acceptable. So in the House, we worked to find a point where we could get a majority to advance a bill to the Senate, let the Senate talk about what their best ideas were, because the status quo is not, in my view, acceptable to the vast majority in the country.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Congressman, but the latest information I thought I had was that we were down to the country was down to maybe one county without a provider for the individual marketplace. You have different?
Well, I'm just going on numbers from the end of July that we had in the individual market a vast majority, a vast third or so of counties that only had one choice or fewer out there. If it's improved this month, I haven't seen those statistics yet.
The administration has not committed, it has continued thus far the subsidies in the individual marketplace, but it has not formally declared whether it will continue them. Should it?
Well, I think we have to have, I want to see a repeal and a replacement for the Affordable Care Act. So right now the Affordable Care Act is the law of the land, and I think we have to live by that law.
So, yes?
Yeah, I think we should continue, providing the services that the law agreed to provide until we can change it.
You and your colleagues in Arkansas regarded with alarm some of the proposals in Mr. Trump's budget. Where's that going?
Do you have a specific question?
Some of the spending priorities, the reductions in spending that he would enact.
Yeah. Well, the president's job is to propose a budget. It always goes more slowly in the first year of an administration. We got the president's budget in around May 15th of this year, but it's the Congress's job to decide what the priorities in spending are and work those through our appropriations process. So things like sharp cuts in research at our land grant institutions at the NIH and things like that, that's not going to sit well with the Congress. We just passed the 21st Century Cures Act that completely revamped how we spend money at the National Institutes for Health, which I think benefits research institutions around the country, prioritizes health spending and research spending like we should. So that's just a single example. Sure, we're going to have disagreements with the administration, whether it's Democratic or Republican, about spending priorities.
Well, infrastructure as well. Mm-hmm. You singled that out.
Yeah, infrastructure, I still want to see, President Trump says he has an infrastructure priority. I've met with the Transportation Secretary, Elaine Chao, about this. I think we should tie infrastructure to our tax reform package, in my view, because I still believe that the opportunity to repatriate capital from abroad by changing our corporation tax level is an opportunity to fund infrastructure beyond what the president proposed in the budget, which was to spend about $200 billion in 19, 20, and 21 over and above what we have in our federal highway program. He wants to marry that with outside capital to reach an approximate amount of $1 trillion spent on infrastructure. So in the president's budget proposal, he put about $200 billion, as I say, in those 3 years. To reach that other $700 billion to invest in infrastructure, I think marrying that to the tax reform plan would be a way to generate that private component to it.
He's also calling for, his budget anyway, calls for substantial reductions in the out years anyway on entitlement spending.
Yeah.
Can you accept that?
Well, one disappointment I had in the 2016 race by Mrs. Clinton and Donald Trump is they didn't propose any plan from an executive point of view of how to reform our mandatory spending programs in the out years. So I think in some instances in his budget it stuck primarily around waste, fraud, abuse, some programmatic changes modestly, but it's not changing the design of those programs.
And how would you advise the administration?
Well, I think I think there's a lot of areas that we can do a better job on. Senator Cotton and I have a bill on Social Security disability program, for example, that we think would, in the out years, produce a lot of savings to the federal government, to the Social Security Administration, and lead to better outcomes for people who file for Social Security disability. Once you get on Social Security disability, you tend to stay on it. We don't do audits of that very effectively on redetermining if you're still disabled and should be maintained on the program. And our proposal is basically a test program where when you come on it, we ask you if you think this is going to be a short-term disability and that you'll be able to go back to work in a reasonable amount of time. And what we'll do is categorize you that way, give you incentives to go back to work, incentives to keep the income, but stay on the Social Security disability system until you're able to get back to work. It's that kind of wholesale change I think we should experiment with in order to lower one of the mandatory spending programs.
With about, and I heard this figure, approximately 15,000 people a day, boomers, go on Medicare and
Right.
Social Security.
Right.
Can that spending can that spending be reduced with that influx of enrollees?
No, I think that you're talking about the programs in the out years for way beyond the baby boom. I mean, I think that the ideal way to take a look at Medicare, for example, spending and how it's structured is for people in their 30s now or 40s. So 30 years before they reach a retirement age of 65, what changes might you make to that Medicare spending program? How is it structured? How is it formed? What are the eligibilities? What do you pay for? And get the net present value of that actuarial difference in the out years. This is the kind of long-term structural change I think would be good for the fiscal health of the country and not break stride with how to have an effective retirement program. I mean, a healthcare program for the retired people.
Let me go back to the ACA for a second, if I may. You had the health lobby in Arkansas.
Right.
Even your fellow Republican Governor Hutchinson, you and the delegation were at odds with the state administration.
Yeah.
An uncomfortable position for you, or was it?
I've talked to the governor extensively about the ACA, including we used his letter that he wrote to the House and Senate back in February and March as a guideline for changes in the bill. And when the Senate failed to pass any version of health reform to go to conference with the House, Governor Hutchinson went back to Washington to work with a group in the administration about what happens next. Where do we go from here? And I think he was encouraged by those discussions that people are still looking for a solution to, I think, the final puzzle to bring a repeal and replace program to a head, which is what do you do about the expanded Medicaid populations? You have that in 28 states, but Steve, you've got all the other states that did not expand Medicaid. And I think the challenge for the federal government in designing a repeal and replace is how do you do that fairly between the states? Governor Hutchinson's principal focus is how do I create a waiver-free society? How do I get Medicaid program to change where I don't have to go seek a waiver? I can just have more flexibility in designing the program. And that's the challenge for every governor because every governor's population's a little different.
But they all want the money.
They all want the money, but this is one of the, I think, challenges of the way the ACA was written by the Congress. You had a lot of consumers hurt by the president's promise, if you like your plan, you can keep it. If you like your doctor, you can keep it. I think a lot of people will agree now that was absolutely not the outcome of the law. And likewise, they offered to pay 100% federal share for expanded Medicaid populations, with that declining, which was, in my view, not a sustainable commitment on the part of the United States. And states should have realized that expanded population would be moved back down to whatever their state Medicaid match was over time, number one. And number two, the provisions of the Act caused a lot of those services to be even more expensive and less flexible than under traditional Medicaid. So those are the areas where I think our governors are working in the Senate and with CMS and Dr. Price at the Department of Human Services. How can we craft something that we can be fair to states, be fair to our constituents that are on traditional Medicaid or on expanded Medicaid in those 28 states, and move some of these health improvements forward?
Can you do that? I mean, the surveys seem to indicate that after all the uproar in the initial years, the disastrous rollout of the Affordable Care Act in terms of the technology of it.
Right.
People tend to like some of the aspects of it. Is it now woven into the American social safety network?
Well, I think we can. I think we can amend it and change it and try to make it better. President Obama's objective was to improve access, but also improve affordability. And some access was improved in some states, although the studies now show that a vast majority of the people that were in expanded Medicaid would have qualified under traditional Medicaid, the vast majority. So I'm not even sure that we got as much expanded access as people thought back when they passed the ACA. And it certainly has not helped affordability on a macro basis, either as a percentage of GDP or in bending the cost curve down, or even for a typical a family. So that's why the law has to change, and I think people will be accepting of changes that would lead to equal or better access, but more affordability, which is the theme of what I think the House and Senate have struggled with to try to find that spot, working with our governors to try to do that. So I don't think it's per se ingrained. I think what people want is more affordable health care, and that's a promise that was made back when the act was considered, and it wasn't delivered.
Well, does some of that responsibility though fall to the Congress?
Yeah,
in terms of funding the subsidies.
Sure. Well, I think the House's view was to do a refundable tax credit approach for that individual market. For people eligible in that market, to make sure that pre-existing conditions were covered with continuous coverage at prices that were not higher, using innovations, reinsurance, federal backstop in the pre-existing condition pool. And those were the two areas, I think, outside the Medicaid expansion population that we're most focused on and got the most discussion in Congress and the most discussion I've had with constituents. And that's the work we continue to try to find the solutions to those that can pass both houses of Congress.
They can't pass?
That can pass both houses of Congress. That conversation continues.
But the conversation involving the level of federal support for the subsidies in the individual marketplace, that's dead?
No, I don't think so. I just said the refundable tax credit was the solution in the House, and in the Senate, we didn't see a detailed solution per se in the Senate other than the greater use of health savings accounts and some of that. That's why I'd hoped that the House and Senate would go to conference and try to work out a package that was acceptable to both houses.
You've got a tax reform, you mentioned the tax reform proposal by the administration. Is that acceptable to you? CBO, I think, says it would add, actually, to the deficit.
Well, when we get back in September, I hope we have the House, Senate, and the Trump Treasury Department in sync on what a tax design will look like. We have a House bill that we've worked on for 5 years. It goes back long before my service in Congress under Dave Camp, then Paul Ryan, now Kevin Brady, the current chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. It's pretty detailed in terms of concept about what they want to do. We've had a lot of briefings on it, but the Senate has been relatively out of conversation on taxes and what they would be interested in. So what I was pleased to hear before we came home to work in the district in August was that the Senate, the House, and the Trump Treasury Department had been meeting on what would be a consensus view, and I hope to see that when we get back in September.
This tax reform, should it be revenue neutral? Should it raise revenue?
I think it can be revenue neutral to some modest short-term deficit if you look at the details and see what the scoring is by CBO and what the assumptions are on dynamic versus static scoring of the tax revenue and what the design looks like.
Which would you prefer, dynamic or?
I prefer dynamic scoring, where you get, and just for viewers, dynamic scoring really tries to take into account all the different changes inside the economy that will be a result of the changes in the tax code, instead of what is called static scoring, which says I lower a rate, revenue falls. Trying to find that is an art, not a science, but what I think we all want to do is two things: make our country more competitive vis-a-vis the rest of the world on corporate taxation, business income taxation, and get a faster growth rate in our economy. The last 10 years we've been at 1.8%. That's basically half of the post-world average, post-World War II average. It's unacceptable, and that will do a lot to help the job outlook, bring people back from at the lowest job participation rate since 1978, and try to increase our productivity in this country.
Well, under there you would acknowledge, and you've worked with federal fiscal affairs over a long period of time, and you had a career, in civilian life anyway, in finance. Dynamic scoring is looked upon with real skepticism by a great many government finance pros. You, as wishful thinking.
But I think static scoring is looked askance by many fiscal finance pros too, because it doesn't take into account the real reactions in the micro and macro economy to changes in tax revenue, and we've seen that. We have evidence from the Mellon Coolidge plan, the Kennedy plan in the 60s, the 80s experience with certain behavioral changes in taxes, where you cannot say that dynamic scoring isn't a useful tool to see what outcomes will be. The other challenge, I think, to the tax plan is, can we get a consensus in the House and Senate to make the tax changes permanent? You may remember in the administration of George W. Bush, he proposed some tax changes to spur the economy after 9/11. They couldn't reach that consensus due to both dynamic, static scoring, but just generally in the Congress, and they expired after 10 years, the budget window.
I was going to ask, has there ever been a permanent tax bill?
Yeah, the 86, well, I mean, look, the Reagan tax changes in 81, that package was permanent. It was phased in over 3 years. The 86 tax reform 31 years ago made the largest, most significant permanent changes to the tax code in terms of simplification, streamlining on the economy in 2 generations. But the tax code is 70,000 pages long when you include the regulations, and barnacles grow on this ship over time. People put back in their special ideas, and in 31 years we've accumulated a lot of barnacles, and the world around us has changed dramatically. The Berlin Wall fell. Eastern and Central Europe took our approach to low, flat rate taxation. Asia has changed dramatically in that way. And so we are now a high corporate income country, which has been an incentive for people to move their operations offshore. My top priority in this tax reform on the business side is to lower that C Corp rate and go permanent territorial taxation, so that if you're Merck or Microsoft and you generate global revenue and you pay taxes in a foreign country, that's it. You've paid your tax in Malaysia or in Germany. You can now bring that money back into the United States for capital budgeting purposes without an additional tax. We're the only major country that does that. I think that'll make our big companies more competitive. Big companies more competitive. And then for our entrepreneurs that use pass-through taxation, limited liability companies or limited partnerships that are taxed on their personal income tax rate, there I hope we move to simplification and have a business pass-through income tax rate that's as close to that corporate rate as we can, and that will make paying taxes in our entrepreneurial sector are, I think, easier and better, and both will produce, I think, economic growth in the United States.
You stood by the party last November and endorsed President Trump. Do you have any regrets about that?
Well, you had a binary choice in November to vote for Republican Donald Trump or Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton. And I voted for Donald Trump because I wanted someone with his business background that would approach the economy and approach the number one issues I thought related to the campaign. One, and that's the economy, getting jobs, growing faster, and changing this trajectory of the growth rate I referenced a minute ago of 1.8% for the past decade. It's not acceptable. We cannot increase incomes for our families if we don't have a faster growth rate. We can't provide the revenues for the federal priorities that you've talked about if we don't have faster economic growth. And for me, that was a clear distinction to vote for that economic agenda, for the national security agenda that the president outlined in the campaign. And so in that regard, I stand by the vote I cast.
The executive branch would appear by multiple accounts to be in something akin to, I don't use the word lightly, but chaos. The Joint Chiefs are speaking out. His own cabinet members are separating themselves. With all respect to Mr. Trump, with all respect to the presidency, do you think your president is stable?
Well, I think the first year of presidencies is difficult.
Personally.
And I'll cite President Clinton's first year in office, where we had the Branch Davidian crisis, we had Lanny Grenier not confirmed, we had several other candidates withdraw for problems in the confirmation process, we had State Department employees quit over President Clinton's proposed changes in foreign policy, we had a change in the Chief of Staff, we had a change in the communications director during that first year of President Clinton's office. So there's a lot of ship righting when you move from a campaign with a lot of campaign geared people into running the government. And I think President Clinton witnessed that. I think President Trump is witnessing that. And I'm hopeful that our Chief of Staff, Kelly, will create the kind of discipline inside the White House that gets the president the information that he needs to take decisions, but keeps the administration moving on this agenda, the ambitious agenda that we have, which is to improve health care, get a tax reform bill enacted, continue the effort to pursue policies that improve our economy, and have a homeland security policy that keeps us safe and a national security policy that's respected around the world.
Is he stable?
I have not seen something that indicates to me that he's not stable. He is a New Yorker with a communication style and a operating style that I personally don't share, but he is, I think, got a good cabinet. I think he has people out working hard to push this agenda, and I think he needs to get into the process of communicating, sure, to people across the country, but moving his agenda forward by working with Congress toward that end.
Got to end it there. We're out of time. Representative French Hill, thanks very much for your time.
Appreciate your time.
See you next time. Thanks for joining us.
Local broadcast of Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the award-winning Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, Arkansas's largest major newspaper, bringing you local, national, and international news since 1819. By the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.